This will be your first and final spoiler warning for Attack on Titan up to chapter 138 of the manga. This video will contain my interpretation of the events in the story of Attack on Titan. Attack on Titan is a story about choices, sacrifices, and consequences. We see these ideas presented through many different themes, and these themes are explored through characters and their relationships. In this cruel world depicted by Hajime Isayama, characters often question their own motives, what they fight for. In this video essay, I'm going to be talking about Levi, Erwin, and Zeke, the value of life, and giving meaning to death. Both Levi and Erwin are characters who are in undoubtedly renowned positions in the Survey Corps. Levi is introduced to us as humanity's strongest soldier, and his first appearance in chapter 9.5 gives us a brief, shallow look into his beliefs and attitude towards death. After a Titan deals a fatal wound to one of his subordinates, Levi approaches his dying body to comfort him before his end. When asked if his death would be in vain or of use to the human race, Levi answers that not only has the soldier's life been of use to humanity, but even his death will give Levi the resolve he needs to keep moving forward. His goal at this point is to exterminate the Titans for the sake of humanity. A simple one, yet a noble one. Erwin, on the other hand, is the charismatic and stoic 13th leader of the Survey Corps. His speeches can be blunt and brutal, yet equally persuasive. But despite his charming character, he is the leader of a military organization that boasts a 90% mortality rate, with only a 50% chance of a soldier surviving their first mission. And this isn't any coincidence, as we find out during the mission to capture the female Titan, when Erwin feeds the majority of his soldiers false information, resulting in their brutal deaths. He is fully capable of sacrificing the lives of his comrades for the greater good of humanity. These people never needed to die. Captain Erwin planned to risk their lives because, as Armin says, someone who can't throw anything away will never be able to change anything. When forced to face monsters, they can leave behind even their humanity. Inevitably, Captain Erwin is criticized by both the general populace and the military police for his cruel endeavors. When placed under scrutiny for causing the destruction of large amounts of property and 100 civilian deaths in Stohas district, he does not hesitate to defend himself by stating that his initiative was the necessary course of action needed in order to prevent any future deaths at the hands of the female Titan. Again, this plan wasn't a reactionary measure taken by Erwin. He's actively planning ahead and executing those plans because he believes he can give meaning to the lives that were lost because they, in some way or another, helped humanity prosper and improve their chances of avoiding extinction. I want to take a second to dive deeper into Levi's character, to evaluate his ability to make choices and inspect his relationship with Erwin. During the mission to capture Annie, the female Titan, we learn about one of the most important feelings driving Levi's decision-making, and something that haunts him to his core: regret. Throughout this arc, he is tasked with making decisions that could easily mean the difference between his squad surviving or being killed by Annie. As his squad is being pursued by her and they beg Levi to give them the order to fight back, he remains silent. After some time, he tells them that Aaron's life is a priority over their own. They should die if it means protecting Aaron, because he's the hope of humanity. Eventually, the decision to trust in his friend's abilities or to fight back himself falls onto Aaron, and Levi gives him the little advice he has. He doesn't try to convince him to choose either option, or to tell him which answer is correct, but instead says this: "I don't know the answer. I never have. No one knows what the outcome will be. So as much as you can, choose whatever you'll regret the least." I'll get back to this in a second, but first I want to talk about the relationship Levi and Erwin have. After being separated from his squad, Levi is worried about them and tells Erwin that he's going to regroup with them, but Erwin demands that Levi remain with him, and Levi obeys him, despite Erwin's decision lowering Levi's squad's chance of survival. Levi is surprisingly willing to follow these orders. Erwin even says that the thing that surprises him the most about Levi is his willingness to follow his superior's commands. He's not the perfect hero people make him out to be. The reason he is so willing to follow orders is because he doesn't know which choice would be the correct one. Erwin's judgment is seemingly never clouded. He's the shining symbol of humanity's ability to move forward, and so by trusting Erwin's judgment and relying on someone else, Levi doesn't have to make a choice, and he can minimize his feelings of regret. However, ultimately, Aaron's decision to trust his friend's abilities and Erwin's decision to keep Levi with him resulted in the brutal massacre of Levi's squad. Levi loved his squad, as evidenced by his composure after witnessing their corpses. And yet, despite this love, Levi does not blame Aaron for being unable to save them. Levi empathizes with Aaron. He fully understands what it feels like to blame himself for not making the right choice, and he knows what it feels like to have his friends die on him, which is why he has to keep fighting in order to give meaning to their deaths. The Clash of Titans arc in Attack on Titan gives us even more insight on these characters. This time, though, the story focuses on exposing their true goals to us. During the mission to retake Eren from Reiner and Bertholdt, we see Erwin back up his grandiose claims of sacrifice and determination. Someone who can't throw anything away will never be able to change anything. In this mission, Erwin and the scouts are acting as bait to gather pure titans towards Reiner, and chaos ensues. Erwin's selfless nature shows itself as he directs the scouts to dedicate their hearts and charge towards the armor titan. At this moment, one of the pure titans bites Erwin's arm and pulls him off his horse. Despite this, he again commands the scouts to advance. Even when he is bleeding and on the ground in titan-infested territory, he commands the scouts to escape with Eren, referring to himself as replaceable. It becomes apparent that Erwin fights solely and wholeheartedly to ensure a bright future for humanity. Later, in a conversation with Levi, Erwin acknowledges that the sacrifice of his arm was not nearly enough to compensate for all of his comrades' lives he had sacrificed. Erwin, just like Levi, is not a perfect hero without emotions. He isn't able to fully throw away his humanity. The deaths of his subordinates weigh heavily on his mind, and he experiences unimaginable guilt. But beyond that, Erwin isn't even the leader of humanity he presents himself as. He does not fight solely for the sake of humanity. He has an ulterior motive. His dream. You see, as a child, Erwin was always a seeker of truth. His father, being a teacher, was well aware of the history of humanity taught within the schools, and because of that, he realized all of the contradictions and lies within it. He and Erwin had a dream to uncover the true history of humanity, the walls, and the titans that the government had covered up. Although because of this dream, his father was killed in secret by the government. In a conversation with Pixies, Erwin claims that his father was killed by human greed, and that the people who killed him acted not for the sake of humanity, but to protect their own asses. And so, all these years later, Erwin's dream of finding the truth was, and still is, his reason for being in the Survey Corps. This is why he smiles when he hears the news that Connie's mom has become a Titan. He's one step closer to achieving his dream. Up until this point, Levi's goal has been a simple, noble one: to fight for humanity. His only enemies were the Titans, mindless creatures of terror. While he had often been forced to choose between two morally ambiguous alternatives, his goals remained the same all the while. But with the shift into the Uprising arc, Levi would no longer be killing purely evil beings for the sake of humanity. He would be killing other humans because of a difference in opinion or because they were part of a different group. He would no longer be fighting for humanity, but for the humans he cared about. His goals changed. During the conclusion of the Uprising arc, as Kenny's life nears its end, he shares some knowledge with Levi. After spending years observing and trying to understand Uri, Kenny came to this conclusion about humans. every last person I've seen was the same way, whether it was booze, women, or even God, family, the king, dreams, children, power. They couldn't keep going unless they were drunk on something. They were all slaves to something. In a conversation with Dallas Zachary, Erwin is accused of being the same as the shady government that killed his father. He prioritizes his own life, his ambitions, over the sake of humanity. Erwin does not deny this, and says that his reason for it would have to be his dream. It becomes apparent just how much Erwin values his dream when he talks to Levi about it before the fight in Shiganshina. Levi cares about Erwin and, as such, does not want him to join in the fight, especially in his physically limiting condition. When Levi threatens to chop off Erwin's legs if he doesn't stay behind, Erwin replies that his dream is more important than his legs. When Levi asks him if his dream is more important than humanity's victory, Erwin says yes. At this point, Erwin basically acknowledges that his sacrifices and the sacrifices of his subordinates have not been for the sake of humanity. He sacrificed them for the sake of his own dream. Levi, knowing Erwin, a slave to his dreams, could not be stopped, reluctantly agrees to let him join in the mission. Levi also hears Aaron, Mikasa, and Armin's conversation, where Armin talks about his dreams to explore the world outside the walls. But then something interesting happens. As the mission to attack Shiganshina and investigate Grisha's basement begins, the scouts are widely cheered on by the people for the first time in history, and Erwin, hearing this, lets out a powerful roar of appreciation. There are a couple of important pieces of information we learn about Zeke during the Return to Shiganshina arc. The first is that Zeke has fun when he's killing the scouts, and he thinks it's crucial to find joy in every little thing. While these remarks may very well be sarcastic, they become important later on. The second is that he doesn't believe in finding meaning in death, because such ideologies only fuel the cycle of pain and suffering in life, and he pities the scouts for this. The value of Erwin's life is his dream, the truth. But Erwin had spent his entire life lying to himself and others about how their deaths would mean something because the living would keep fighting for the greater good of humanity. He used their sacrifices as a means to satisfy his own goals, his dream. All those lies, and the only thing he would have to show for it would be the guilt of killing his comrades. He was so close to achieving his goal of getting to the basement and finding the truth, but instead, Levi tells him to sacrifice himself to be a diversion for the Beast Titan, and Levi promises to kill Zeke to give meaning to Erwin's death. Now, Erwin has two choices: to choose his life, his dream, or to choose his death, humanity's future. I want to tell you the story of a man named Demo Reeves. When Trost District was attacked, he delayed the evacuation when he tried to bring all his belongings with him, but when Trost District was on the verge of collapse, he stayed rooted here and supported the men and women with nowhere to go. Maybe he felt something after he saw this town after the Titan had run through it, or maybe he learned something from his struggles after losing it all 5 years ago. 5 years ago, he was an outcast. He chose the safety of his family and friends over protecting the town. This time, he was trying to save the town. But someone has squashed those hopes. I promise to avenge him. Demo Reeves was a greedy man, but a man who ultimately chose to die protecting humanity. Demo Reeves is Erwin. When Flock asks Erwin if they're all going to die whether or not they stick to the plan, Erwin says yes. But when Flock asks Erwin if that makes their deaths meaningless, Erwin says no. Because Erwin does not see death as the end. Erwin Smith died for the future of humanity, and it's up to those humans who live on to give his death meaning. This speech Erwin gave was the truth, his genuine feelings. He wasn't lying anymore for the sake of reaching his own goals. The value of Erwin's life is his dream, the truth, and while Erwin died without ever accomplishing his dreams of uncovering the truth, in the end, he became the truth. They couldn't keep going unless they were drunk on something. These were the words Levi remembered as he was tasked with making yet another choice, to choose between reviving Erwin or Armin. Erwin's drive to move forward was dependent on his dream, which would conclude after reaching Grisha's basement. But Armin's dream of reaching the outside world had yet to be accomplished, and so Levi, hoping not to regret his decision later and swearing to kill Zeke in order to give meaning to Erwin's death, chose to let Erwin, a slave to his dream, finally be free. The hostility between Zeke and Levi in their relationship comes mostly from Levi, and this hatred would only become stronger as time went on. As the story continues, Levi's goal changes from exterminating the Titans to eventually killing another human, and aside from a few snarky quips, their resentment wouldn't be reciprocated from Zeke. While Levi himself is plagued by regret, Zeke clearly doesn't carry any remorse or guilt at all. Levi regrets letting his team die for Erwin, and he thinks that at the rate he's going, his comrades' deaths will have been pointless. For this reason, Levi even disobeys his superior's orders and decides to kill Zeke himself. He truly believes that if he's able to get revenge at this very moment, then he can give meaning to his friends' deaths. It's at this moment in the story that we see that Levi and Zeke truly do not understand one another. But it's also much more than that. The theme of death is one I focused on heavily in this video, and in this fight between Zeke and Levi, neither of them understand each other's views on death, and this becomes even more important later on in the video. Zeke can't comprehend why Levi is able to kill his own soldiers. When Zeke confronts him on this, Levi answers, "I guess you wouldn't know just how many friends we've had to kill." Levi has been forced to make choices that get his friends killed in the past, and as such, he has learned that their deaths were never the end for them. Their deaths can be given meaning so long as Levi continues to fight, and Zeke, someone who views death as the ultimate conclusion, was not able to foresee this. Now, I want to take a look at why exactly Zeke thinks this way, and this all started back when he was still a child. At a young age, Zeke was always familiar with the cruel side of life. Being an Eldian within the internment zone, he was taught by both his parents and grandparents that the world was a harsh place, but he had never been someone who felt the need to try and rebel against this reality. As we see during his military training, he was highly unmotivated. He only longed for someone to play a game of catch with. Now, Zeke had many different influences in his life, but the influence that won him over was able to do so for a simple reason. Mr. Xavier was willing to play catch with Zeke. He was willing to give him those trivial moments of fun that he never experienced before. And this influence eventually ended in Zeke forming his euthanasia plan. Zeke is someone who considers his own life and everyone else's to be valueless because of the pain attached to it. He comes to the conclusion that the world would be better off without the subjects of Ymir. It is for this very reason that he doesn't believe that people's deaths could have any meaning, and it is why he feels no remorse for the frequent killing he partakes in. To Zeke, death is the end goal. It's salvation. There is no reason to die for anything but death itself. And this is the reason Levi gets exploded by Zeke. Levi is someone who values life and who fights exclusively to give meaning to his friends' deaths. He can't understand that someone like Zeke would kill himself for no reason other than to die. Unlike Erwin, who dies while looking towards the future and for the plan to succeed, Zeke kills himself because in the present, he wishes to simply end his own suffering. A loss is something intelligent creatures like humans can learn from. During the remainder of the story, we see both of these characters learn about their own flaws after being beaten, and we see how they act because of it. Feeling defeated, Levi contemplates his goals up until this point. He thinks about the fact that, for some reason, he's been unable to complete his final mission from Erwin. He's still yet to be able to prove that Erwin's death really did mean something. He can't kill Zeke. And then it hits him. Levi's motive has shifted from the righteous, honorable goal of eliminating the Titans to a goal born of his own hatred and malice. His friends died for the future of humanity. They died in order to help people, not for the short-term catharsis of murdering another human being. What kind of meaning would Levi's animosity give to the deaths of his comrades? Just like Zeke, Levi was pursuing the end goal of killing, rather than the long-term goal of helping humanity. After losing to Erwin in Paths, Zeke himself contemplates why he should even fight in the first place. He tells Armin that all living things, from the moment they are born, indiscriminately fear death, and that fear brings them suffering and causes them to bring new life into the world in order to ultimately avoid death. But this cycle of pain can only be broken by giving in to death, to be freed by it. But Armin sees the world in a different way. He thinks that people don't have to be defined by their fear of death. Although they are not necessary to stay alive, subtle, trivial moments of happiness are precious to Armin. And Zeke realizes that the reason he lost to Erwin was because he couldn't understand Ymir's connection to her life. At this moment, Zeke understood that the value of his life was these trivial moments. The value of his life was playing baseball with Mr. Saver. And by recognizing this, Zeke understands that dying protecting other lives can give meaning to his death. In this moment, to stop the rumbling, he has to die. But death itself is no longer his end goal. In the short time before his death, for the first time ever, Zeke feels genuine remorse for the people he's killed. Levi, also for the first time, calls Zeke by his actual name, no insults. Now, with Levi and Zeke both having the same motive to stop the rumbling, Zeke allows himself to be killed, and Levi kills Zeke, finally giving meaning to the deaths of Erwin and his comrades. But I think Levi realizes something. By killing Zeke and stopping the rumbling, Levi has given meaning to Zeke's death as well.